In 1799, British officers storming a breached fortress in southern India discovered, among the dead, a ruler who had built rockets, planted a Tree of Liberty, sent ambassadors to France, negotiated with the Ottoman Empire, and, alone among the major Indian powers, refused to sign a single subsidiary treaty with the East India Company. His name was Tipu Sultan. The company had fought 4 wars over 32 years to reach him. The question worth asking is not who won, it's what the company feared so much and why. Maps, money, decisions. This is Tareekh ka Hisaab. Begin not with Tipu, but with his father. Haidar Ali was a military commander who rose through Mysore's court and by the 1760s effectively ruled the kingdom, one of the few successor states that had actually gotten stronger as the Mughal Empire dissolved. He had something most of the company's neighbors lacked: a disciplined standing army, trained in part by French officers, and a revenue system that was not hemorrhaging money. The First Anglo-Mysore War, 1767 to 1769, ended with a company defeat, and a treaty that was almost immediately dishonored by Madras. This is important. When Haidar Ali allied with the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad against the company in 1780, it was partly because the company had broken its own commitments. The Second War, 1780 to 1784, was Haidar's retaliation. Haidar died in 1782, of illness, not in battle, and his son Tipu continued the war to a negotiated draw, the Treaty of Mangalore, 1784. It was the last treaty in which an Indian power dictated terms to the company as an equal. Haidar's calculation was this: the company could offer trade, but every ruler who traded influence for protection eventually found they'd sold more than they intended. He chose confrontation. He chose correctly, for a time. The question was whether his state could outlast a corporation backed by the British Treasury. Now let's audit Mysore under Tipu Sultan, who ruled from 1782 until 1799. Revenue. Tipu reorganized land taxation, promoted sericulture, Mysore silk, and built state-controlled trading monopolies in sandalwood, pepper, and cardamom. He was, in modern terms, running an industrial policy. Military. The Mysorean Rocket Corps, iron-cased rockets, capable of carrying incendiary charges further and more reliably than anything the company had in the field. The British later studied them carefully. William Congreve's famous military rockets trace a direct intellectual line back to Seringapatam. Diplomacy. Tipu sent missions to France, to the Ottoman Empire, to Persia, looking for the alliance that would let him fight on 2 fronts: his army on the ground, a European naval counterweight at sea. The strategic problem was clear. He needed an outside power to break the company's coastal monopoly. France kept almost delivering on that promise, and kept not delivering. By 1789, the Governor-General was Lord Cornwallis, the same man who had surrendered at Yorktown 8 years earlier, and was not going to lose another war. Tipu had attacked Travancore, a company ally, in late 1789. Cornwallis used it as the opening of the Third Anglo-Mysore War, 1790 to 1792. But Cornwallis understood something Tipu had also understood. This was a coalition problem. He assembled one of his own. The Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad, Tipu's neighbors and rivals, were brought into the field against Mysore. Tipu faced 3 options. 1. Negotiate, accept a subsidiary alliance, keep a diminished throne. 2. Fight alone, hope France intervenes. 3. Build a counter-alliance with Marathas and Nizam. He tried the third, and failed. They chose company money over Mysorean solidarity. He then fought and lost. The peace of 1792 stripped Tipu of half his territory and forced him to hand over 2 of his sons as hostages until the indemnity was paid. He paid. He handed the boys over. He planned for the next round. In 1798, a new Governor-General arrived in Calcutta, Richard Wellesley. His younger brother Arthur would become the Duke of Wellington. And Wellesley was not interested in defensive containment. He had a doctrine, the subsidiary alliance system. The logic was elegant and merciless. An Indian ruler accepts a permanent British military garrison on his territory. He pays for it, in cash or, more usefully, in land. In return, the company guarantees his throne against internal and external rivals. The ruler gives up independent foreign policy entirely. He may keep the ceremonial trappings of sovereignty. The actual decisions are made in Calcutta. The Nizam of Hyderabad accepted in 1798. The system was spreading south. Tipu would not sign, which made him, in Wellesley's framework, not just a rival, but a proof of concept that had to be eliminated. The pretext was Tipu's continued diplomatic contacts with France, a genuine strategic concern, not a fabricated one. Wellesley moved in 1799. The siege of Seringapatam lasted about a month. The walls were breached on the 4th of May, 1799. The assault took the fortress in hours. Tipu Sultan died inside the city, in the fighting or in its immediate aftermath. The exact circumstances are disputed. What followed was methodical. Wellesley personally walked the city the next morning. The company installed a young prince of the old Wodeyar dynasty, the family Haidar Ali had displaced, on the throne of a greatly diminished Mysore as a dependent client. The largest share of the conquered territory went to the company and the Nizam. The Marathas received considerably less than expected. That last detail is worth remembering. The Marathas had helped the company twice now, and twice received a smaller share than the map suggested they deserved. They were watching. They were counting. Step back from the battle and look at the full 32 years. The company fought 4 wars with Mysore over 3 decades. Why? Not primarily because Tipu was a religious threat. The communal framing, which has been applied heavily in retrospect from all directions, was not the company's working calculation. The company's working calculation was geography and revenue. Mysore sat between the company's Madras coast and the Western Sea. A powerful, independent Mysore was a revenue barrier, a military obstacle, and, critically, an open door for French intervention. The French were the company's real terror. Tipu understood this mirror logic. His French alliance was not ideology, it was the only counterweight available. He was searching for the same thing the company had, a powerful external backer. The company had one. It was called the British state. Tipu did not find his equivalent. That is the ledger. The rest is narrative added later. The fall of Seringapatam solved the company's southern problem permanently. But it created a new one. What do you do with the Marathas, who had helped you beat Tipu and expected their share, and who were now watching very carefully as your subsidiary alliance spread across the map? Next time, the Maratha Confederacy, Asaye, and the last great war before the company ran out of rivals. This is Tareekh ka Hisaab.